Lessons from leadership, lessons from innovators, founders. Today's episode is a little reminiscence of things I read and heard, interviews of, and spoken with people recently that inspired me and that are also relevant to most of our position, in particular Tesla. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's September 15th, 2020. This is Krim Delko. The fund today is up 19%. The market's up 50 basis points for the year. We are up now 218%. The market is up roughly 6%. So we have now recovered not just the massive drawdown from last week, but also we are now 20% higher than pre-massive drawdown. It just goes to show how volatile situations can be, but also how dangerous losing your grip, losing your focus can be in the markets. And I would say this is one of the major skills that we as fund managers have to have, which is to stick with positions when things turn nasty, unless they are nasty because of certain things that are fundamental to our thesis. Now let's get to the topic of today, and I want to focus on two things that I've come across recently, which are very relevant to Tesla, but in general also relevant to disruption and relevant to wealth creation. And let's start with the first one. I'm in the process of reading Kip Wilson's book about the foundation of Lululemon. I think Lululemon is an interesting company because if you look at the Lululemon stock, it's actually one of the best performing stocks of the last decade, better than Apple, not as good as Tesla, but it's in that category, as good as Amazon. I mean, it depends when you start and how you exactly compare it. But needless to say, if you had invested in Lululemon a decade ago, you would have made a lot of money. So this is a real wealth creation company. And Chip talks about his, by the way, I'm not sure if you pronounce his name Kip or Chip, but I'm going to go with Chip now. I'm sorry for mispronouncing it potentially. Now, he talks about the foundation of Lululemon, and I'm actually not done with the book, but the one thing that strikes me is the following. So when he built Lululemon, he was obsessed with certain things which were completely new to the fashion industry. One was technical and style, the combination of technical and style, and the other was selling it to a new type of customer. He calls it the superwoman. And he goes quite a long way out to describe what he means with that. And he talks about a massive demographic shift, which was sort of fostered maybe in the 60s and 70s, and then really came to fruition by the end of the 90s. And that is the working woman, the independent, powerful, emancipated woman. And we all talk about this, and we've been talking about this for decades now. But what it really means is that there has been a time, and that's probably around the 1990s, when there was a massive demographic shift in American society and also Western European society, where women started to work for longer and were more focused on professional careers. That had to do with their control of pregnancy, that had to do with general emancipation movements. It also had to do with the availability of jobs because women started going to college also and were educated as human beings that should have more content in their lives than just finding a husband, get married, and have kids. That's why I'm saying it probably goes back to the 60s and 70s with the sexual emancipation movement, and those parents raised their daughters in a way that in the 90s, those daughters then started working and becoming powerful, independent individuals. Fundamentally, what that meant for Chip Wilson is that there was a new type of clothing to be designed, and that's where Lululemon came in. And he goes out of his way again to explain why he thought that that is the case. He went to a yoga class. He realized that women like yoga, that yoga is sort of the female version of surfing and things like that, sports that he has been involved before Lululemon. And he wanted to design clothing that look good and are functional. And for that, he needed vertical retail because in wholesale retail, there's two problems. Number one, people are not educated enough in wholesale retail to explain technical details and hence ask for a higher price that those technical details demand. And number two, also wholesale retail, the way it works is that the buyers in wholesale retailers, they just look at charts, they look at what sold yesterday, and then they're interested in buying more of that. So to bring in new things on the wholesale side is almost impossible, or by definition. So what that means for Tesla, just made me think, very interesting, that Tesla went from day one vertical retail. Everything had to be controlled by themselves, and as probably many of you know, Tesla is fighting tooth and nail still in certain states in the United States to be able to circumvent the dealership, which is kind of like the wholesale equivalent in the auto industry. And it's a small piece that we are all getting accustomed to, which is, yeah, I mean, Tesla is selling direct, we know that. But I just want to point out how important, how central that little piece of the Tesla business model is, and how we believe at Orange Capital Partners that's probably going to be one of the major key differentiators going forward, even in the next 10, maybe 15 years. Because if you have technical capabilities that are key to your product, that are so they're not just some marketing wrap, they are really key to your product, you have to have a way to communicate that to customers. And if you go through a general wholesale model of dealership, it is very difficult to do that. Now, Tesla is not necessarily in the business of asking higher prices for those yet, although you could argue they are because of the autopilot, for example. So they are actually trying to charge more for technical innovation. They just call it autopilot, which is a bunch of software wrapped up in a name that means a lot more than just lane keeping and things like that. So anyway, point is that if you have a company whose major raison d'être, so the major reason of existence, is to have rapid innovation and consistently come with valuable new innovation for customers, you need to have a vertical business model. And I think that is part of the reason why we believe Tesla is going to be very difficult to dethrone by companies like Volkswagen, for example, because it's not just one thing. It goes back to this theme that we've had several times before, which is the innovation stack, which means that it's one solved problem, created new problems, and then there is another bunch of problems to be solved, and so on and so forth. And this is what we call the innovation stack. So, for example, Tesla solved the direct sales model. By the way, within the COVID-19 crisis, Tesla even went further and went to the online-only no-touch model, which is another step forward. It's part of the same theme, which is, look, we're able to sell our cars without third parties involved. This is what it really means. And in fact, we're even able to sell our cars without any people involved, because we have a very good online digital communication about what they are. We have mouth-to-mouth marketing. We have people showing the car by just driving it around, etc. So there's a lot of things that Tesla has created, some of them intentionally, some of them just by nature of the business. But in the end, Tesla is able to keep selling the car in a way that others are not able to do, which is they don't need to advertise, they don't need to accentuate the benefits of the car, because they either have a very good way to show that online, or even better, it's their customers who are actually doing it for them. So this direct sales model is one little piece, but it just made me think while reading Chip Wilson's book, how important it is, how key. Wilson goes out of his way to explain how important the direct sales model of Lululemon was and still is. Probably he's now out of the company, but I believe it's still very important. So wealth creation, again, starts with innovation stack, and in the business of consumer products, having a direct sales model is almost indispensable. By the way, there's another very important example here, of course, which is Apple. The other theme I wanted to talk about today, again, another wealth creator, CEO that I'm inspired by is Reed Hastings. He just issued a book called The No Rules Rules or something like that along those lines. It's a book about culture. It's a book about how to build a culture of innovation and create wealth. And of course, he's using his own example, Netflix, to elaborate. And my point here is I haven't read the book. I've just listened to an interview he gave with Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz. So I'm not going to elaborate too much on the book. Of course, I'm going to read it. But he says one key thing that to me is also part of the thesis of Tesla. And he talks about culture. He defines culture as the things that get you promoted or fired. And then he talks about how to maintain a culture of creativity and how that is, in his view, a culture of creativity and fertility. So he talks about two types of companies. The company which is highly, highly efficient, optimized for efficiency, and then the company which is optimized for creativity. Let's say two examples: an artist studio or a design studio with 2 or 3 partners, maybe 1 or 2 employees, I would say is a typical creative company because all they do is come with creative concepts. And then we have companies like Caterpillar, GE, GM, Ford. They are optimized for efficiency. It's all about cost cutting, lowering cost, consistently delivering quality at a certain standard, at a certain cost. So you have these two types of companies which optimize for two different things. And what Hastings is trying to explain is that within Netflix, he was trying to do both. Of course, efficiency has to be there, particularly quality, which Netflix is known for. They are able to deliver streaming better than anybody else, but then also creativity. Now, I could do a whole episode about some of the question marks I have about, let's say, things like creativity within Netflix, because I'm not so sure that the company is as creative as they always proclaim to be. They've certainly done a few things, but in my view, Netflix is a little bit on the less disruptive side as we speak now. And I would say that as a shareholder, I wouldn't necessarily want to be long Netflix right now for various reasons that I think have to do with the fact that they're not really able, that their innovation stack is running out of differentiating factors and that the others are catching up, in particular Disney. But let's take his lessons nevertheless and apply them to Tesla again. Now, what is Tesla's biggest challenge? And I think for me, if I get invited to the Battery and Shareholder Day, I'm not yet invited, I hope I will be, I would ask, this is my question for management, and that is, how do you hire people that have high quality skills and education, that are not elitist, and that can function in a creative environment and also optimize for efficiency? How can you bring all of these things together? Because it seems to me that as a successful company, no matter what you do, that's exactly what you have to do. With growth, you have to have more of those types of people. So you need somebody who's very good at what they do, who doesn't have an ego, and who can optimize for creativity and efficiency at the same time. Is that even possible? Can you please answer this question to me? I'd be curious to know if there are any clues maybe you can give me, or just the way you think about this in general. So this would be my question. And as Reed Hastings talks about it, when I hear people talk about this culture thing, I often feel they are a little bit tapping on their own shoulders without giving real concrete examples. Okay, what does it really mean? For example, in Tesla's case, you need to hire engineers that can build better batteries, that are very good at, let's say, material science, to build certain, let's say, conductivity materials within the battery, so when the battery overheats, those materials don't overheat, and they can actually transfer heat out of the battery. For example, this is a small example, but I'm sure it's something Tesla engineering is grappling with. And how do you bring in people that are very good at that, but that are not boring engineer types that just optimize for one thing, that are open enough to, let's say, try, fail, and keep going? How do you create a culture where they maybe even do something completely out of the box and fail, and then keep their their reputation. Is that something you do, or maybe you don't do? But the way it seems to me from the outside, Tesla is that kind of company because they continuously come out with these types of new ideas that, in my view, have to come from their employees, and these employees, while they're very, very highly educated and good at what they do, they also seem to be optimizing for creativity, not just efficiency. And I'm just curious, how do you balance that? How do you do that dance, that rope dance? And now, final point in today's episode is a lesson that we have from Elon Musk himself. It's a tweet, and the tweet is about the production rate in Starship. And I don't want to elaborate too much on this. This is another episode on its own, but it just struck me how critical this is. So in order to build a better Starship for SpaceX, what SpaceX did, is build a production line to continuously produce Starships so they can test them, destroy them, learn from the test, and iterate. And this is the key to disruption. As we said many times, the rate of disruption is disproportional to the cost of rate of innovation, of iteration. So the cheaper iteration becomes, the higher the rate of disruption. And this is just a beautiful example, again, of how Elon Musk works in his companies. And we believe that this is the competitive advantage that also Tesla has relative to the competition. Thank you.